Hey everyone, welcome to Flexibility Script. This video is going to be going into some great ways to open up the quadriceps musculature. That's the musculature along the front of our thighs. We're going to do some techniques that don't involve the use of tools, but just using your own body weight and really a bit more on the functional flexibility side of things. We're also going to do some that do integrate things like a band to get into a banded movement mobilization, to get into the joint capsule and help release the tissue along the whole anterior chain a bit more. And I'm also going to integrate the use of a floss compression band into one of the mobilizations to help open up the whole front of the thigh. So one of the muscles in the front of the thigh in your quads is your rectus femoris or rectus femoris, and there's a quick, easy way to look to see if there's any muscle shortness in the tissue. And if you do have some shortness, then these stretches and releases will really benefit you. So to check it out, you'll be finding something like the end of a table, end of a bed, and this assessment is called a Thomas test. It's also used to look at some hip flexor musculature as well. For today, I'm just going to go into looking at the quad. So we're wanting to get about a 80 to 90 degree angle when we drop our leg off the end of the table. And not just that, we want to drop the leg off the end of the table while maintaining the lower back down on the table. So what you'll do is you'll have a seat somewhere on your bed, and you can have someone else kind of look and check it out, or you can kind of sneak a peek and see where your leg lies if you don't have anyone helping you out. But you'll lay on the table, and I'm going to get tailbone at the tip of the table. I'm going to assess my left leg here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to hug this knee in towards my chest. I can grab behind the thigh, or I can grab around the knee. I'm going to hug it in, and I'm going to lay on back. Now when I hug the knee and lay on back, it makes sure that my lower back stays down. From here, this leg is just going to hang out and drop down, and that angle that I'm looking at is the angle of my my knee and thigh, and I want it to be about 80 to 90 degrees. When it's relaxed here, this would be about 45. This would be a little shorter, and so scoot over just a little bit. So sometimes you'll drop the leg and you'll have a little bit of a short iliopsoas along with the short rectus femoris, that quad muscle, and that quad muscle is the one that becomes that patellar tendon. So if you hang out, even if you're down here or here, doesn't matter, but look at where that angle of the lower leg falls. And if it's not 80 to 90, if it's more hanging out there, know that these things that we're going to go into the video will help you out. This very first one is a bit of both passive and active techniques. I'm going to use, you can use your hand, but I like using like a rope or say a bed sheet. I'm going to use this band to help me out here, and it's going to be gently opening up that whole quad musculature. So I'm going to use the table, and very similar to the position we were in with that assessment we just did where your low back stays down, it's a similar position you'll be in here. I'm going to use the band to wrap around my leg. I'm going to just do it just as so. Create this little bit of a loop here, and then the band's going to go right through that loop, and that way it makes it easy. So it's right around my ankle, so that when I go to pull into the stretch, I don't have to adjust or anything. The band will be anchored right in, and you could do the same with a rope or sheet or towel or whatever you're using. I'm going to be stretching my right leg, since the right leg is the one I've just anchored in. So from here, I'm going to be laying down, and I'm going to get so that just half of my body is on the table. This other leg is going to be kind of hanging out forward, and it's really similar to me being on my back, hugging my knee as my leg drops. It's the same thing, except I am not on my back, I'm face down. Now from here, all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this heel, and I'm going to be bringing it up towards my bottom until I feel a stretch through my quads. I can use the band here to help pull until I feel the stretch, and then from here I can just hang out and hold, just thinking big inhales, big exhales. Now let's say you're having a difficult time and maybe at this point is where you feel the stretch as opposed to heel toward your bottom. You can stay there and hold, and you can do a couple of things from here. I can do a contract and relax technique, and all that is once I find that end point, I can stand there and hold for about 20 seconds up to 60 seconds. After I do this passive hold, I can start going into some active flexibility techniques. The contract and relax, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push the band away. So I'll still hold it, and I'm holding it with my right hand, right here. And all I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna gently push for 5 seconds, trying to push the band away. And then when I relax, I'll be able to take that band, that heel towards my bottom just a little bit further, and I'll hold there for about 10 seconds, kind of feeling that new stretch and that new release. And then again, after 10 seconds, I'll do another contract and relax. Same thing, I'm gonna push the band away for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When I relax, I'll be able to pull just a little bit further. It kind of uses a little bit of what's happening within our muscle receptors. That you'll contract, and then as you relax, some of those muscle receptors will sense that relaxation and allow you to go further into that stretch. So from here, that's option one. Option two is you can get a little bit of active isolation stretching instead of contract and relax, and all that is, I'm going to breathe in, and as I breathe out, I really use the hamstring and musculature along the backside to bring the heel as close to I can towards my bottom. Once I can't anymore, I'll pull just a little bit more, hold 2 seconds, and then straighten it back out. And again, I'll think breathe in, and then as I breathe out, I'll bring the heel as close as I can towards my bottom. Once I can't anymore, I can give myself a little more support and hold 2 seconds, and then take it back down. So on this one, I'll go through a bit more range of motion, consistently using my musculature to try to get that heel close to my bottom, and when I can't anymore, I'll hold that end point 2 seconds. I'll sometimes give myself a little pull with the band to go into the stretch, and I usually repeat that anywhere from 5 to 10 times. What you'll find with that active isolation stretching is that every time you go for that 2 second hold, it's almost that feeling is that of like, ooh, I don't think I could go anymore, or ooh, that's a lot of a stretch, but it's just held for 2 seconds. So you consistently kind of challenge that end point, hold for 2 seconds, and you return right back to the starting position, not allowing a stretch reflex to kick in. So you always are kind of pushing the end point, but you just hold 2 seconds. So that stretch reflex, and that stretch reflex is sometimes if you overstretch and your muscles kind of contract in order to protect itself from injury, you're kind of having a little bit of play and manipulation with that because you're taking it to a far end point, but the fact that you just hold 2 seconds doesn't allow that reflex to kick in. And as you keep going in and out of that active isolation stretching, you'll find that with every repetition you have a little bit more range of motion. So both are techniques that can be done on the table, and you can just do passive, meaning where you're just holding the stretch, or you can integrate that contract and relax and active isolation, or both, depending on where you're at. And everyone's different. Maybe one leg will actually respond really well to contract and relax, and the other leg may respond really well to the active isolation. So you can have both and enjoy it. All right, so from here, I'm gonna undo this band here. And I'm gonna go into another stretch that is a little bit more on the passive side. I call it the wall quad stretch because it's going to be against the wall and you'll stretch your quad. It's also known as a couch stretch because you can also do it like off the end of the couch, and I'll explain the positioning. I'm just going to move my table. Alright, so one of the things with the stretch is that it's nice to have a mat or somewhere to put your knee on. I'm going to use this to help my knee out, just to make it a little bit more comfortable. A towel or something like that will do too. And I'm going to just demonstrate it off the end of this bench here. And you can also do it against the wall. Alright, so to do this stretch, I'm going to come into an all-fours position. Now once I come into an all-fours position, I'm going to also demonstrate on my right side. All fours, that right leg's going to come and gonna find that wall. My toes are gonna be on the wall. And now from here, before I even begin, I'll bring that opposite leg and I'm gonna bring it out. And if I need to, I can use my hand to get that leg into position. From here, don't try to come up just yet. Your goal is going to be to think about squeezing the glute almost like you're driving the hip forward down to the ground. Once you feel that glute squeeze, you keep it and you assess and see if you feel a stretch in your quad. If you do feel a stretch, you're just going to hold it there. If you don't, or you want to you feel like you've held this position and it's starting to let up, to challenge yourself more, you'll just take that opposite hand and bring it on your knee. And it's almost like you're taking yourself a little further away from the ground, still maintaining the glute squeeze. If that feels okay, you can take that other hand and place it on the knee. And then that could be where you're at there. And if that's where you're at, you could stay and hold. And only you know where you're at, depending on the intensity of the stretch you feel coming through the front of the thigh and hip. Just make sure you keep that glute squeeze. If you want a little bit more, your end goal would be to be able to come upright so that that shoulder and knee line up, all while maintaining this glute squeeze. So you don't want to be getting up here by doing that. You always want to be glute squeeze and be able to come up all as one while maintaining that glute squeeze. And this would be your end point here. You can even come back a little further if you wanted to as well. On these, I find it really great to just breathe and relax into it. Usually at the end of a workout is usually a really nice time to open up the whole front of the hip and quad. So again, resist the urge to let go of the glute squeeze and to do one of those to come up. Always think squeeze, almost like you're driving the hip forward. Keep that glute squeeze and then drive back until you find your end point. And it's totally okay if your end point is here or here. Just know that with time, that's all gonna open up the front of the hip, and you may find that you start off at a certain point, and as you keep breathing and relaxing, you may find the ability to start easing your hands up to help line yourself up. But just kind of listen to yourself. On that stretch, I like a good 1 to 2 minutes. I sometimes play with reaches as well to deepen the stretch, but not necessary in order to get a nice relaxation into it. So this next one, so I think this is maybe like the third or fourth thing we're going into. It's going to involve the band, and I'm going into a banded movement mobilization. This banded movement mobilization, instead of oscillating in and out of tension, I'm just going to go into just a hold, a sustained hold. And it can be really intense, just a heads up, because it really will open you up in hip extension and intensify that stretch that we actually just did. So I'm gonna just change the camera real quick. Okay, that should do. All right, so from here, I'm gonna be utilizing the door as my anchor spot for the band. I'm going to take my band and I'm going to use the Theraloop door anchor, and I'm just going to open that little slit up there. I'm going to take my band, go through, now this, and then from there pulling right through, and there it's ready to go into that into the door hinge side. So this quad stretch, I sometimes like integrating it into the hip extension mobilizations. There's a video where I go into some banded mobilizations to help improve hip extension and really help open up your hip flexors, and they kind of lead really nicely into splits. So I sometimes do some of that first part of hip extension, where opening up the hip flexors, and then I go into doing this quad stretch into it too. So I kind of play and freestyle depending on what my body needs. So from here, I'm gonna come on up, and I'm just opening the door, and I'm gonna be kneeling near the door. So I'm gonna be setting that band up right around hip thigh level. And so when I open the door, I'll open it up, I'll place that door anchor right through, and I'll close the door, and I'll give a little double check and pull on the band and make sure it's secure, and all should be good. So from here, My back is going to be to the camera a bit, just a heads up. I'm going to demonstrate on my left leg. So what's going to happen, I'm going to stand up, and that band is going to be going right at the very top of the hamstring, very top of the thigh, like right below the butt cheek pretty much. From here, I'll be kneeling down. I'm going to come back until I feel just a little bit of light tension from the band, where I feel like the band is pulling me, but I'm still in full control of it. This front leg, I usually like that foot to be just slightly out in front of the knee. And most important thing here is to make sure I'm not here with not sticking my butt out. I'm thinking about keeping a good glute squeeze, and again, that knee, hip, and shoulder all line up. Now from here, keeping that glute squeeze, I'm going to be bringing the heel towards my bottom. I usually try to grab on, and I'll usually see if I can gently pull that heel towards my bottom as far as I can. And let's say that's my end point there. I can stop and hold here. If I want, I can use my other free hand, and I can grab a hold behind. And while keeping my glute squeeze, keep that glute squeeze, I can gently pull until I find that end point. And then from here, I'm just holding. Big inhales, big exhales. I just want to make sure that I don't do one of those and trying to hold that stretch from this position. Always think glute squeeze, line yourself up, and then from there, really working on bringing the heel towards your bottom. I sometimes have played on this one to where I'll do a little contract and relax, where I'll push into my hands like I'm trying to push myself away. And then once I relax, I'll be able to bring that heel a little bit further. I've also done this where I've held on to something, and where I have that band in the same position around my ankle, and I'll loop it through. I'll actually demonstrate that real quick so you can get a visual. So I'll take a band of the leg that I want to be stretching. I'm going to place that band around my ankle, very similar to the one I showed you off the end of the table. I'm going to bring that so that's sort of behind me, making it easier to pull. From here, band goes through. I'm sorry, not the band. The leg goes through the band. And then, same position. Oops, I'll come down and I'll lunge down on that knee of the leg that's in the band. Once I'm here, I'll come back till I feel that band pulling me. I'll think squeeze the glute. And then I can, from here, grab a hold of the band. Once I have it, keep my glute squeeze, and I'll start bringing the heel up towards my bottom. Use my hand here, and I can gently pull until I'm just holding on to the band, just as so. Again, band is anchored. I maintain a glute squeeze. I start bringing the heel towards my bottom, and I'll start maneuvering my arm so that I can keep pulling up and be able to anchor it up over my shoulder. From there, I can hold, if I have a wall or a post or a dowel for support, it's sometimes really helpful. Main thing is that if you keep that glute squeeze, you'll feel more stable. As soon as you start letting go of that glute squeeze is when you're gonna feel unstable. And from there, again, that one's more of a sustained hold, so I just get into that stretch position and I hold and I breathe into it. Alrighty. Lots of things. So depending on just how short that hip, that quad is on that assessment part, usually determines what I do to try to help improve it. And sometimes it's a mix of all these things, and so many people respond to respond differently to different techniques. So I always like having this toolbox of different techniques to be able to pull from and see what works for me, along as works well for others. So this very last one I want to show you is for the quads. Again, I shouldn't have said that. This whole thing is for the quads. Just say this is going to be going into utilizing little floss compression. So little floss compression band around the quads to help relieve any muscle stiffness and tightness and stickiness. That band is going to compress the quad musculature, and then I'm going to go into some stretching. The stretching that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to keep moving in and out of a stretching position. And I can do this with or without the band. I'm going to utilize the band to kind of get a 2-in-1 where I'm releasing the tension in the musculature along with improving the flexibility of the quads. With the band, I'm always going to be, the compression is going to go right on my quad. So when I go around behind it, you'll find that, you'll see that I won't put any stretching to it. So I'm going to pin the band here, I'm going to stretch, and I'm going to wrap. And then there's no tension along the bottom part here, meaning no stretch that I put in. Again, I'm going to pin, stretch, wrap, and then nothing along the back. Again, pin, stretch, wrap, and then wrap. Pin, stretch, wrap, and I always like pinning it. Not that you can't, you can always just kind of go into pulling it, but I always find pinning before stretching helps me sure that I don't kind of pull that whole tissue underneath on the hamstrings, which can be done. It just tends to feel really uncomfortable. And I know I started right above the knee. You can start anywhere along your thigh, along your quad, wherever you feel that there, if you feel around where you feel there's more tension and tightness, that would be a great place to wrap. So I'm kind of coming towards the end, so I'm just going to find a spot for that band to wrap around. And now this floss compression band, floss means movement, so we're going to be, while it's being compressed, we're going to move into it, and it's kind of similar to foam rolling or massaging out the front of the thigh, but instead of it being a foam roller or a lacrosse ball, it's that voodoo band, that floss compression band, I should say. So from here, to do this release, again, you don't have to have the band just adds a little bonus to it. I'm going to be straightening the legs out, and I'm going to be bringing the leg that the band is on, I'm going to bring it close to my right below the knee, and I'm going to flatten or put my heel down on the other one. From here, I'm going to come up. First things first is seeing if you can get the heel towards your bottom, and then you can come out of it. If you can do that, you can kind of progress with the end point being trying to get that knee as close to the ground as you can, then back out of it. Again, I'm going to scooch back a little bit more. Again, I'm coming heel towards bottom. From here, I'm going to come forward, and as you notice, I'm coming forward and I'm kind of maintaining that knee, hip, and shoulder angle, and then I'll come out of it. I'll breathe in and I'll breathe out, find my end point stretch, and come out of it. I could be on my hands, I can be on my fingertips, and I'm just gently flowing in and out of this stretch. Pause about 2 seconds, then come back out. Pause. And it's just nicely opening up the whole musculature along the front of the quad and front of the thigh, and breathe in and breathe out. As I'm doing this movement with that floss compression band on, it's helping release the tissues in the front of the, and on the quad. And if you can almost think about, if you ever have some bubble gum or glue and you have glue between both of your fingers, and how if you had to push your fingers together, if you're trying to get it off, it's sometimes hard to kind of do, I'm gonna come closer, to kind of do that motion to get it on. But if there's glue on both, if you stick your fingers together and you kind of start moving, you'll end up undoing some of that stickiness and that glue that could be in your fingers. I think that's kind of like what's happening with the voodoo band, that it's kind of being, all the tissues are being forced to glide over one another, and it ends up helping really release the stickiness and stiffness in the musculature and fascia. I could also be bending and straightening while I'm in the voodoo band. I just like being able to integrate a bit of a stretch into it, then backing out of it. And I should go anywhere from 10 to 20 reps as I go in and out of that. And undo the band. And so that one's a bit more active, and I really almost save it sometimes that if there's a lot of shortness in the tissue, that I'll go into doing some myofascial releases with the lacrosse ball and the foam roller, some active flexibility techniques along with passive, and then kind of combine it into some more movement that's opening up the quad at the same time. So feel free to explore, try them all out. There's no wrong or right, and you may find one that works really great for you that you respond to and is a keeper, but give it a shot. Bye.